Hi, everyone. All of us here at Mean Girls are so excited for our latest book club selection. You'll never believe what happened to Lacey by the amazing sisters Amber Ruffin and Lacey Lamar. I'm Niani Feelings from the cast of the first national tour of Mean Girls, and joining me today are the incredible authors Amber Ruffin and Lacey Lamar, Tina Fey, our Mean Girls script writer and co-creator, and members of our company. Welcome, everybody. Okay, let's reintroduce ourselves to each other and to the fans. Coming to you first, Miss Boss Lady Tina Fey. Tell us where you are and your role in the show.
Hi, it's so nice to see everyone's faces again. My name is Tina Fey, and I am the book writer of Mean Girls Musical, and I am coming to you from Midtown Manhattan, my office here in Midtown Manhattan.
Awesome. Amber, where are you?
My name is Amber Ruffin, and I am coming to you from upstate New York. And it's hot.
Yeah. Lacey, coming over to you.
Hello, I'm Lacey Lamar, and I'm in Manhattan as well. Yay!
Deshawn.
Hi, I'm Deshawn Bowens. I'm coming to you from Florida, and I'm in the ensemble of Mean Girls.
Sydney.
Hi, I'm Sydney Mayroof Wong, and I am coming to you from Oregon. And it was 110 here yesterday, and it's 96 degrees right now as well. So I'm also hot.
I'll stop complaining.
Caitlin.
Hi, I'm Caitlin Louise Smith, and I am in Missouri in the Midwest, and I'm in the ensemble for Mean Girls.
And Megan.
Hi, I'm Megan Masako Haley. I am in Virginia. I just got here, and I play Gretchen in Mean Girls.
Amazing. Y'all, I'm so excited for this conversation. But first, let me tell you a little bit about Amber and Lacey. So Amber was born in Omaha, Nebraska in 19, whatever year is plausible for you, but still implies she's young. She moved to Chicago to pursue a career in improv, and laugh all you want, it worked. She was hired by a theater called Boom Chicago in Amsterdam, where she did improv shows for what felt like a billion years. She also did shows in Chicago at the Second City Main Stage, and that's it. That's a complete list of full-time jobs you can have as an improv performer in the world. In 2014, Amber became the first Black woman to write for a late-night network talk show in the United States. She's a writer-performer on Late Night with Seth Meyers and the host of The Amber Ruffin Show on the new NBC streaming service, Peacock. Yay. And Lacey Lamar is Amber Ruffin's big sister. She was born in Omaha, Nebraska. And if you want to know what year, take the year you imagined her being born and subtract 4. Lacey is the middle child of the family, yet somehow the only normal one. After all the less than fun jobs she's had over the years, she feels she finally found a great job as a program director at a good company. Living in Nebraska, Lacey loves to challenge of creating safe spaces for celebration of nerd/African-American culture. We're so excited to have y'all.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us
Here.
Yes, we are really so excited that you're here. We all love this book so much, and well, I mean, I'm letting Niani lead the questioning, but like, I can't believe we got you to be here.
It's really amazing. Everyone, this is our 5th Mean Girls Book Club discussion. And for those of you who have been with us the whole way, we are so grateful. And for those of you who are just joining, welcome. So let's get to it. There are so many great questions from our fans. So our first one comes to us from Camila Comedy. How does it feel to write a book about something that is so serious in such a good mood? And were you worried at all about how people might take it, that they might be offended or not take it seriously enough?
I don't think Amber and I were worried about that because this is just how we talk and it's how we are. We can't tell a story. If one of us was hit by a car, it would be like the funniest story we would possibly, there'd be 8 jokes in there, and that's just what we do. So we just make light of things. Sometimes maybe we shouldn't, but that's just how we communicate, how we talk, and it's just what we do. So I don't think we gave it a second thought. And the stories are kind of funny.
Yeah, the stories are funny. We certainly weren't worried about hurting other people's feelings. I mean, I'm worried about maybe like mom getting embarrassed, maybe hurting Lacey's feelings a little too bad. That's it.
And what was it like to actually write these stories down?
It was very easy. All we did was remember. You know what I mean? Because Lacey said the stories basically how they were written down because she's a funny person. So I just remembered and I wrote them down, and then Lacey and I sat together and then she recounted the ones I couldn't remember. It was very easy, really. Like I think a regular person will write a book and it takes a lot of work. And, you know, like friggin' they have to have like, they got to damn near storyboard it. But for us, we just put them in order from the easiest story to hear to the worst story to hear. And then we just wrote them down in that order at the end.
Did you start writing them down? Like, did you say like, we're going to make a book of these? Or were you just starting to write them down just like, we just have to remember these?
We also cheated because during my whole career, I've always kept journals from when I had to complain to HR. So, and I would write things down as they were happening. I just always carried my little calendar book with me and I wrote stuff down. And if someone knew when I was flipping to the back, that's where I write all my notes. And, you know, during the morning meeting, someone's saying something extremely racist. I'm like, oh, okay, I need to remember this. And I would sit there and just literally write it down as they were saying it. I'm like, Negro, okay. And so Amber, when I was like, it's time to write the book, I pulled out all these journals and I was like, so yeah, it was too easy.
Did people that work with you start to catch on? Like when my mouth is moving, Lacey flips to the back of her book.
Just
Maybe
one,
I should stop moving my mouth.
Just one lady did, and she raised her voice at me and said, "Stop writing." And I was like, "I will not." Nope.
Well, let me open it up to Tina and the cast. How did you feel reading it? Like, did it make you uncomfortable? Were there ones that shocked you?
Yeah, I mean, for me, what was become so harrowing is the pure tonnage of stories. Then you're like, and this happened, and then this continued to happen, and then this happened at a different place in a similar way. And it's the tonnage, but you guys do write about it with such amazing humor, and it's so clear that coping through humor is definitely like a mechanism in your family. It's such a great coping mechanism. It's also like a great way of getting people to hear the truth, to be like, I'm going to tell you this story back in a funny way, and I defy you to, argue that this is not absurd. What was it like for you guys to read this book the first time? I read it twice.
I'll send it over to Megan.
Hi. I think so. I read the whole book cover to cover on an airplane, just like in one go. And I feel like my face the whole time was just I couldn't like laugh out loud because people are sleeping, but I just feel like my whole face was like, oh no, oh no, oh no, oh no, oh no. And I think it's like, even though I know that everyone has, a lot of Black people have these stories specifically, I think the part that was really shocking to me is, Lacey, that you got fired so many times. I just don't understand how. I guess that's the part that felt the most shocking, maybe just because like I haven't lived in places where I've like seen that happen, because maybe I think, Amber, I'm more like in the HR where people are like, did anything happen? Make sure, like, are you feeling pressured? Like, I think that's more than my lived experience with HRs. So I just was like, I'm so sorry that the people who are supposed to be advocating for you just don't at all. Opposite, really. But yeah, mostly this space.
Yes. Deshawn, how about you?
For me personally, reading these stories in a humorous light was a very unique and effective way in showcasing, the raw, very transparent absurdity of racism, point blank. And I think it just takes a true talent to be able to, write something like this and be able to use comedy and humor, to get that point out. And just there were so many moments in the book, I was just like, I just don't know how y'all did it. Like, the patience, how many times, like, your longevity and your persistency to want to do the right thing after reading each story was just so, so inspiring. And also, I love that you guys wear shoulder pads on Anita Baker's birthday.
One simply must.
One must.
Sydney?
So I felt like the entire time I was reading this book, I was in a coffee shop sitting across from the two of you, and you were bantering back and forth, telling me these stories, and I was just sitting there with a couple of friends who had so much to tell me, and I absorbed the information because of the conduit of humor. I absorbed it. I was totally shocked and scared for every single day of your lives. But I felt like I was able to absorb the information in a way that I couldn't if I read it in another way. And I feel like I got to know you more, and hearing it from such a personal perspective was really important for me and really cool. So.
And Caitlin?
Yeah, I think for me, it was just coming to terms with the fact that I was doubting everything. And I was like, this can't be true. Like, and that feeling of disbelief because it was so shocking. And I think for me, the most profound thing, it was like right in the beginning of the book, I believe, was every time that you start feeling like this isn't true, or there's no reason, or there isn't any motivation for this racism, that is the racism. And I think that was the thing that really, like, from the very get-go of the book, that I was like, whenever I feel this instinct, like, oh my God, this can't be true, like, that is the blatant racism. And it can show its ugly head in many, many ways. So I think there's a lot of moments for me as a white person where I was like, should I be laughing right now? Like, is this funny? Like, it was just honestly sort of like a slap in the face of like, I forget like that good people can still be very racist. And it was a nice reminder of that.
Tina?
Yeah, I mean, listen, Lacey, there were times we all thought that there were times we all just thought you were a liar. No, but there are times where you're like,
Fair enough.
I just wanted to say my favorites, but there's some stories that were my favorite because they were satisfying, because you get some sense of comeuppance. But the story that broke my heart, I think the most, was the story of the lady taking your crayons when you went to art camp and refusing to believe that they were your crayons. That made me feel like I would, and the Disneyland parking lot made me feel like I was going to vomit. But I think my favorite story, is it Sears or JCPenney where they were following you and your mom was like, I figured out your secret knock. It's not that slick.
No, it's not.
That is the perfect transition to our next question from @the_pandemic_Slytherin, which is a great screen name. They want to know what your favorite story was to write, and if there was any that were harder than others to write down.
My favorite story probably isn't anyone's favorite. My favorite story that we wrote was the one where I've been called in to the CEO's office for a huge lie, like not greeting a intern. And they keep me in that room for like 41 minutes. I just wanted that to get out. It was like a release. Like once I told the story, I was like, and then this happened, and then this happened. And Amber's like, oh my God, this is horrible. Yeah, I don't know why, but that's my favorite story because I'm like, no one would believe that was true. But yeah. 41-minute talking to, don't do this. And then, yeah, got fired. That was the one where I was writing down everything as they were talking, and the lady said, "Why are you scribbling? Why are you writing it down?" I was like,
and then at the end, she went back and said, they said, "Well, we weren't saying that." She said, "Well, actually, 10 minutes ago, you said this."
I repeated it back to her.
Pretty great.
Yeah.
I think my favorite story is Harriet Tubman. That's the absolute best story. It makes me laugh so hard. And then to look at the check, and then I forget who we got to put Lacey's face on the check. Looking at that check makes me laugh so hard. Print it out, fill it out for however much you want from Lacey, and then get to the bank. You can cash it.
Out of your book, write a check to yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, that's my favorite. But the weirdest part about writing this book is exactly this. Like looking you in the face and having you go, "Do you remember when blah, 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 blah?" Because the book is nothing but our memories, and a lot of these stories are like Ruffin lore, where our little friends know them. But, this is the first time I'm seeing some of you. And then you're saying these stories back. It feels excellent.
Amazing. Deshawn, what was the hardest story for you to read, and how did you relate?
Well, answering this question, I have to preface it with saying that many of these stories were hard to read, and many of them were indisputably relatable. So choosing one was difficult because while reading these stories, I was like making a mental checklist of like, yep, that was pretty racist, and how many times have I witnessed that happen, or how many times have I experienced this? But choosing one story, there was one that like really tugged at me, and I would have to say that it was the story of Lacey's magic trick, and about how the older white couple, about them and how they were very surprised at how eloquently Lacey spoke. That story just like really got to me. Like not only was it, reprehensible that this old white man just seemed to be so shocked that Lacey spoke so well, but he had the audacity to call his wife over to come see Lacey speaking so well, as if, to quote the book, like she was a carnival attraction. Yikes, it just had me thinking that that old white man had already formed a horrible, horrible stereotypical racial opinion of Lacey before she even opened her mouth because of the color of her skin, and that right there just immediately became relatable to me, and the countless times that I've experienced that kind of reaction from, a white person after I opened my mouth. I remember being a kid and being told multiple times that I spoke very well, and that like went through high school, college, and so forth. And growing up as an inner city kid, talking eloquently or speaking with diction wasn't associated with a race in my household. My mom was an educator, and my family, we come from a family of educators, so at a young age, I couldn't get away with speaking any other kind of way, and I think any child of a teacher would agree with me on that. But I specifically remember being out at school events as a kid with my mom that I would attend. And I remember seeing my mom's white colleagues tell my mom, "Wow, your son speaks very well." And I was too young to kind of really register what was happening, but my mom would kind of her response would be, "He's smart, why wouldn't he?" Or, "Yeah, he started, reading at a very young age." But then, as I'm older, I realized that, wow, my mom was trying to justify why on earth was it such a shock to her white colleagues that I spoke so intelligently. Did we miss something? Like, what's going on here? No, it was, the horrendous racial stereotyping of inner city Black kids, and how that led my mom's white colleagues to openly address my mom about her Black son's way of speaking that didn't match their, preformed ideals of young, inner city young Black kids. And unfortunately, these incidents still happen, but nowadays, being older and, more aware of the society that we live in, I'm able to respond with the question, what thought process led you to the conclusion of telling me that I speak very well as a 28-year-old Black man?
Yes. I mean, every day I have someone say, "Oh, you speak so well." And I'm just like, you know what? Okay. Sydney, what story was the most surprising to you?
All of them and none of them, perhaps. I feel like the last 4 years of the reign of Trump has taught us and shown us that people can say the weirdest, most ignorant things and do the most impactful, harmful things, and half of our country is patting them on the back. And so it's like, where does that seep down through everything? And I grew up in the Midwest. I grew up in a tiny town in Wisconsin. And so they're all surprising, first of all, shocking, horrifying. But when it comes down to messing with people's livelihoods and messing with your health, like the story about you not learning that you had a kidney stone for 5 years, like that seems like apathy to me. And the apathy of that is even kind of scarier than an aggressive attack. It also really broke my heart to hear about the story about your parents and how they were from the top administrators down, just totally, their legs were taken out from under them. Their financial, it was really shocking. And it seemed like a horror movie. The other thing that seemed like a horror movie and that I got a huge surprise from was the last story that took place in Dubuque, Iowa, where during the Black History Month competition, I drove to Dubuque, Iowa 3 times a week from 6 years old to 18 years old to have ballet class. So I know exactly where that story took place. I was like, oh no, they just mentioned Dubuque, Iowa. But I'm surprised at the breadth of my ignorance as a young kid to the racism there. And I've grown to, be more discerning in how I'm observing people and places. But that really breaks my heart that a place that I love was so nasty to you. And you should write a movie about it.
You done already wrote it.
Wrote it. We did.
Stop writing for a second.
I just want to say that probably the whole section that I related to the most was y'all talking about your mom and how you learned to deal with people from her, because I have a very similar experience, and my mom can truly shut anyone down in 2 seconds without raising her voice. And I feel like I learned everything that I know about dealing with people just from watching her. But, I just remember the moment where she even lost it and, had to cuss somebody out. And those moments, even the most composed people, it still is a daily thing that we have to deal with. And I just really related to those stories with your mom. So we have a huge age range when it comes to our fans watching, from tweens to grandparents. There are some very grown-up ideas and concepts in this book, but because it's funny, it's potentially a more approachable way to talk about everyday racism that exists in this country. With that in mind, Layla wants to know what age you would recommend this book for.
We say all kinds of things in there, don't we?
Amber added the naughty words. I did poop and fart.
There's the junior edition. Just take the that's where it's at.
Yeah.
Just take the bad language out and make all the white people nice.
Great.
And then you
there would be no book, I think.
There'd be two words. I don't know. I would say like 4, 5. Shoot, because guess what? If you're a little Black kid, you already know. So if you're a 5-year-old Black kid, So I got to be honest. I don't know what white people do with their children. I don't know. What are we waiting until? I don't know.
I would say
Junior high's a good age.
I'd say 8 or 9. And if
Okay.
Bring it to them. You can skip the cuss words, but
There you go.
or you can tell them the stories. I'm the fanciest prostitute alive.
Love that dress. Look at that. What prostitute was long? Well,
A one that does not make a lot of money.
I made $0 that day.
Well, speaking to what you're saying, Amber, that Black children, this is their life and they learn that. What age specifically did you start to see patterns of racism, if it was an age or, I mean, you spoke about being 18 and how it kind of hit you differently then, but age-wise, do you think that you were always aware of what's going on, or was there a point where it switched?
I was always aware because the house we lived in was the house we lived in because we lost the daycare center. You know what I mean? Everything was, the neighborhood we lived in was, the school I went to was the almost all white school my oldest sister went to, which was like 50-50 by the time I came around. You know what I mean? So like, I'm the youngest of 5, so I had heard all of it. So I feel like I'd always known, but it wasn't until I was older and had that job at the sandwich place where I was like, oh, I'm also deep in it. Like I'm deep in it. It's going to mess with my money. It's going to mess with my livelihood. It's all of it. Yeah. But yeah, I feel like I always knew. It wasn't really a surprise. Lacey, how old were you?
In the book, when we were going for the walk to the grocery store, and I was like 5.
Oh, that'll do it.
The neighbor came out, called us the N-word, brought out the shotgun. That's when I was like, something's going on here. Get on. I always knew.
Lacey, how old was the other girl in that story who was so brave?
Those were my 2 older sisters. Angela, who you do not mess with Angela. Angela was the one that went toe to toe with him.
Brave.
And that's just Angela. Like, that's just who she is. And so, yeah, it's our older sister.
So then if you were 5, then she was, wait, how old were you?
5.
Then she was 9, right?
9.
We're all 2 years apart.
Crystal's like 10, or no, Crystal's like 12.
Oh.
Area. Yeah, so there were 3 of us.
Yeah.
Yeah. Amber wasn't around then. Yeah, scary stuff. So kind of always knew. And when Amber was talking about our elementary school, how it went from almost all white and then more people of color came in. We did not put this in the book, but in and Crystal, who is our oldest sister, my mom, they had a little, what do you call it? Oh, a square dance. They always teach kindergartners how to square dance. And my mom goes and she's watching it. And there's only 2 Black kids in my sister's class. And think about this. Think about how you had to maneuver the dance so that they only touched each other's hands. My sister and the little Black boy, and all the rest of the white kids circled around and did this, and they circled around, but they only touched each other's hands. So my mom was like, yeah, this is not good.
So from then on, she was like, book 2. From then on, she was like in the back of the classroom, freaking once a week and stuff. And every once in a while, you'd be like, Mom, and she'd be like, I'm on it. She'd call up there or walk up there. It was just down the street. But we're talking about like, when did we realize it? Like, also because New York and comedy, it's such a bubble. I keep realizing it. I moved out to upstate New York and Lacey came over, and Lacey and I went to the store to do this and do that. And upstate New York is no Manhattan. And my husband is a giant white man and he parts people like the Red Sea. So I don't really see a lot of, I'll see people talk to him instead of me a lot, but that's not really I still get my service or whatever. Me and Lacey went out. This is last week. And I just like forgotten what it is to be a Black lady. Me and Lacey getting treated like gibby garbage, giggy garbage. It was the worst.
And I'm telling Amber, oh, is this racism? And Amber's like, no way, it's not. And then she was like, oh my God, this is horrible.
Oh my God. It's everywhere. It's on us. It's so bad. We waited for like 20 minutes for this lady. I mean, it was just your regular, you don't exist, you're a ghost. It was that. But I had forgotten, when you're in Manhattan, it's not like that. But out here, baby, woo, just a little refresher.
Yeah. I'm going to throw this next question to Megan. When did you realize or notice that racism is so pervasive in the country in small and big ways?
I think at a super young age, just because of my family's history. My grandfather worked at the Japanese American Museum in my hometown. And so I grew up learning about World War II and Japanese incarceration. And my mom would talk about, blatant racism, from school kids and stuff when she was little. But by the time I was born, my community was predominantly Asian. And so I didn't actually think about my race for until I was almost an adult, just because in my community, it just everyone's Asian. I don't know. And I didn't find out that Asian people didn't live in other parts of the country until I was a senior in high school. And Jeremy Huang was like, you're going to North Carolina. Do you know that there's not going to be any Asian people? And I actually didn't. It never occurred to me. And so I think in the small ways, I started noticing of obviously I don't have the decades and centuries of backstory, but white people wanted to touch my hair in North Carolina. I was like, okay, sure. Why? I'm so confused by this. And I think that also was an introduction to big racism, especially anti-Black racism, once I had moved out of just my, cultural bubble. And I think I didn't really start realizing what my role could be in changing our society until probably 2012 with Trayvon Martin, and then 2014 with Ferguson. And then I think especially in 2015 with the Baltimore riots, that's when I really sat down and was like, whoa, people are not lying. This is not exaggerating. You have to listen to people's stories. And it's kind of embarrassing that it took me that long, because there was one Black girl in my entire high school, and she was one of my best friends. And so I just knew her, and she didn't know any Black people. So anyway, but so big and small, I'm still learning.
Yeah, Caitlin, did you want to chime in on that?
Yeah, I'm from the Midwest, as I said earlier, and I think the moment that it really solidified for me was Ferguson and the shooting of Michael Brown, and because it was the first moment that it had happened right as I had left for college, and it was the first moment where I was out of St. Louis, and then I came back to St. Louis, and they had and and it was just such a shocking realization, because he was indicted, and I think for me that was the moment where I realized I understood that so many people around me, although they were either family or friends, they had this dark side to them, and I had to also look internally and be like, what biases do I have, and how can I go about adjusting, and looking within myself and trying to not only fix those things, but be active and not just passive about how I can, be a bigger person, and to combat all of the small, I would say there were small things that were taught to me that maybe I didn't realize. And once I went away to school, my world expanded. And then once I moved to New York, it was like my bubble became even bigger. And it's like I was finally open to seeing so much more. And I think for me, the biggest thing was exposure to being around other people. And now I feel like I can take an active role, but I feel like when I was younger, I didn't have the voice or the wherewithal to not make an uncomfortable situation. And now I feel like that's where I am now, where I'm like able to like be an ally and actively speak against it.
Yeah, let's
Which
talk about that a little bit more. So, while in some of the stories, people do have malicious intent, there are many stories in the book that involve white people who are just clueless about how absurd their behavior is. How would you respond to something like this in the moment? And would your response depend on whether you were a bystander or directly involved? I'm going to throw that to Tina.
Yeah, I think there are so many moments in the book when, so many workplace things that were so recognizable to me from my time in Illinois, but also, this really is everywhere. And I grew up outside Philadelphia. That's a mess. And so I think, to me, it was inspired to, I'm at an age now in a position where there should be no excuse for me ever to not speak up in the moment if I'm seeing something. A lot of our viewers and participants in this book club are really young, and it might be really uncomfortable for you to say to your grandma or your aunt, like, I don't like that word. But if you can muster it, and if you feel like someone's not going to literally beat you, try to be an upstander. Try at school. If you see something, think of all the nonsense that Lacey went through and be like, if I was around somebody, could I take a couple things off her plate? Could I be the one to explain to my coworkers that "We Winnin" is not a cool t-shirt idea, so that Lacey doesn't have to? Just to try to, I think the more of those moments that can be eradicated, I think that's the day-to-day work that we can do while we're also trying to do the big work of reading the newspaper and understanding, voting rights. We can also be trying to do the small things each day.
Yeah, I really appreciated the section where it was kind of like, here are your choices as a Black person of how to respond. Because I was like, yes to all of these, but I had never seen them written down. I had never really like laid them out like that. So it was really amazing to be like, yes, I've gone through this mental list in the middle of this situation or the other and chosen A, B, or C for whatever reason. Deshawn, can you relate to that as well?
Yeah, absolutely. In the moment, whether I'm a bystander or if I'm directly involved, my response would be to absolutely say something. And, I love how in the beginning of the book, Lacey mentions how when something bad happens to you and you don't say anything, it festers, and trying to act like it's not happening is bad for you psychologically and in just all kinds of ways. And I absolutely agree with that statement. You have to say something, to stop it, or else it continues. If I'm witnessing a scenario where a white person is pretty clueless about how absurd their behavior is, my hope is that if there be another white person around noticing what is happening, that they go and stop their white counterpart. It's already expected of me as a Black person to go and stop racial absurdity, but for a white person to call out another white person on their absurd racist behavior, then I know that could enhance the process of change in the mindset. If someone looks like you is telling you that you're acting crazy, it might hit home a little bit faster.
Megan.
I think when it's super obvious, my first reaction is always just to fight. And so I try to make a big scene, but make it funny, but still kind of mean, but they kind of laugh, but they'll never forget it. You know what I mean? And so I feel like I've done that several times, and I can remember them really clearly. And I've clocked these people, and I've never seen them do it again in front of me, at least. So I highly recommend that. But sometimes I do think it's hard when sometimes it's not as overt, or if you're like, maybe they didn't mean it that way, or sometimes things are just really shocking and it takes you like out of the moment. And so I think that's something I'm working on. It's like, even when you're shocked, take a breath, think about it, and step in, because it is really important that people don't say that and think you agree, or say that without anyone standing up to them.
Yes. Okay, Amber and Lacey, if you had to pick one thing, what do you hope this book will accomplish?
Little old me just wants people to stop, because I just think about all the situations at my job. It would have been so much easier if just certain things weren't said, or, oh, Lacey, is that your real hair? Or blah, blah, blah. Just like the constant, the every day, even though you think it's small, like I'm really not loving the term, microaggression, macro, because all those micros add up and then you just don't want to go to work. Like I would always tell people, sometimes I would sit in my car, and I call it calling in racism. Like they saw me in the parking lot and I would just be like, yeah, I'm not going in because I got that morning meeting and I'm going to get 5 stupid statements. And I would turn around, go back home. Yeah, I'm not. Did we see you? No, that wasn't me. No, because I just don't want to hear it. I sitting through all my morning meetings, you are guaranteed to get one crazy racist thing said, and you have to smile and just be like, and just take it. And yeah, I can't even remember what the question was.
I think you answered it.
I went somewhere else, but yeah.
I would hope that, and this isn't what we set out to really do with the book, but I do hope that an effect that it has is that people just stay open. You know what I mean? Like I have a late night show, so I can embarrass myself very loudly in front of a ton of people. So when people correct me, I go, oh, thank you so much. When my friend not the other day, it was a while ago at this point, said, we don't say spirit animal anymore. We don't say that. And she gathered me. I said, great. I friggin' went to Twitter. I deleted my shit. And then I thanked her again. It was on my way, and then now it's gone. But like the goal is to be a good guy. You know what I mean? I want to be part of a good community that you're a part of. I want that for us. And I just hope that people have that in mind as the goal. And then they stay malleable. I think that's important. It's fun to become a better person than you were yesterday. It's a fun voyage. It feels good.
I agree. Tina, a last thought?
Oh yeah, no, it occurred to me, Amber and Lacey, that it reminded me to bring it back to Mean Girls, that literally like 65 years ago when I was writing the movie, I remember thinking like, well, maybe if we can show some of these behaviors that are can be so hurtful and make them into jokes in the movie, then people can see them clearly, and then it gives them just pries the door open a little bit to start a conversation of like, oh my God, this is like that thing from that movie. Let's not do that. And that like, hopefully that can a similar thing with your book of like, someone will recognize someone in their workplace being ridiculous in a way they saw in the book. And one, it'll help them see it. And two, it also might help them, if not to the perpetrator, at least to this other person, be like, oh my gosh, this is not okay. Because it reminds me of Lacey and Amber's book. And just to start chipping away. So thank you guys for writing this book.
Yeah, I agree. That's a perfect wrap up. Thank you so much for an incredible discussion, everyone. Thank you for taking the time to be here today. And thank you to the fans who read along with us. Let's work to bring about necessary change for 2021 and beyond. Let's be compassionate, understanding, and take care of each other. Thank you. Have a good one, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.